All right, welcome back to Cultivating Connections. It is a new week and we are tackling some new subjects. And today I am with our membership director for the North Carolina State Grange, who also happens to be a fantastic photographer, Jessica Horton. Hey, Jessica.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on, especially on fairly short notice. I really appreciate it. But I figured it was a topic that's kind of near and dear to your heart, so that's okay. So
Yep,
how did you get
definitely.
into photography?
So my mom always had a camera in her hand, and so I guess I kind of followed suit and always had one in my hand too. And when I got into high school, I was fortunate enough that I went to a public high school with a dark room. And it was such a sought after class that you almost had to be a senior to be able to get in it. And so my senior year, I took Photography 101 and learned how to use a camera and develop my own film and print my own pictures and all of that. And it captured my heart. But I had already made a decision to go to college and pursue Parks and Recreation and a degree in event management. And so I did that, but I also took electives in photography when I was in school. So that's kind of where it all started. And then fast forward, my husband and I got married and we had a little bit of wedding money left. And I was like, I'm going to buy a camera. And so I did. And that was almost 11 years ago. And I have been shooting professionally pretty much since then.
So when you say shooting professionally, I mean, a lot of us love taking photos, but we don't, figure out how to establish a business, or obviously there's not a market for everybody to have it. So what do you end up shooting? What are some of your favorite things to do? And how does that work with your job at North Carolina State Grange?
So I shoot a lot of families and newborns, babies. I was definitely not interested in babies until I had my own. But that, as your life progresses, it changes the way you view the world and what you want to photograph. So I have been photographing babies pretty much since she was born, a little bit before that, but not much. And I also shoot a lot of personal work. I primarily, personally, and through my business, I shoot a lot of film. And so I deal with medium format film. But how that kind of played into my job is I started this job, gosh, 12 and a half years ago. And so it was about a year and a half after I started that I started photography. And so my job gave me the opportunity to practice without any holds. We had obviously had no photographer on staff. We had nobody taking pictures at the time. So it created this learning environment for myself that I kind of, sometimes in the nonprofit world, you create your own job. And I just kind of created my own thing. And so I would go, my first winter youth conference, I went as a chaperone and I just took my camera to play. And that was kind of like my first inkling of maybe I could do this for work as well. And then from that point on, I was just the girl who drug her camera. And it kind of, sometimes it's hard when you're the event planner and coordinator and you're also trying to take pictures of the event. It's a balance. So that's how it kind of like led into working with the Grange and doing photography on the side. And then kind of since then, my role ended up changing at the office. I now produce Grange News, which is very photo heavy in any magazine, much less one that's centered around agriculture and events and things like that. So I have the opportunity to do a lot of photography for my job that way.
Yeah, I envy you guys who are on like the front lines in the field of the state granges, because you're able to get all these photos of really great, and various things. And I feel like oftentimes I'm like you, I drag my camera, which actually really now is just my iPhone, but I drag my camera everywhere and I try and get generic shots that I might be able to use at some point. But you're in the middle of doing 100 other things. So it's really hard, but you have the opportunity, I think, to stop on the side of the road in a county and you're going to have a story coming up from something in that county in agriculture and get it. And it feels like sometimes you guys are in such fortunate positions. And that kind of relates with our local granges too, because they're able to get photos around their town, get photos, of things going on in their community, of, agriculture in their area, the seasons, people that are doing things, and really create some vibrant stories, because a picture is worth 1,000 words and people would rather see pictures. So I'm terribly envious, I won't lie.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do, kind of for personal work, but also I use it a lot at the Grange office, is when I travel out to go to Grange camp every summer, sadly not in 2 weeks, but usually, you drive through so much agriculture, farmland, barns, a lot of just like rural North Carolina. And there is this one particular exit that inevitably every year I stop on to get gas. It has a Sheetz gas station. It's nice, it's clean, but it is literally right next to a tobacco field. And I think every year I photograph that field. And I use those pictures all the time for things that are the covers of things, or for Instagram, or whatever. They're just good generic agriculture pictures, and it's a Sheetz gas station. You have to seize those opportunities when you get them.
I think that's a really good transition into my next kind of set of questions, and that is how, when you're talking especially to local Grange members, besides encouraging them to take part in the photo contests and things like that we have, that I'll kind of come back to, how do you encourage them to seize those opportunities, and what ways can local Granges really capitalize on having somebody who can take some good photos to tell their story? Because you're the membership director, so I'm sure you're seeing kind of the payoff here.
I think, yeah, just like I said, you have to look around, and obviously right now we're not meeting. There are no meetings to take pictures of, but that your local Grange might still want to be pushing content through whatever channels that is, whether it's an email marketing tool or through Instagram or Facebook or any of those things. And so you kind of need to have a stockpile of images to be able to put out there, because as we all know, when you're scrolling Instagram or scrolling Facebook, a picture will catch your eye, but not just a block of text. People will just peruse right over that. It's like it never even existed. So you need that like picture to stop somebody in their tracks, and to have that like stockpile of, crops or barns or just rural settings. It doesn't have to be farm related. A Grange hall. It could be just something that you associate with rural living. I associate rocking chairs with rural living. And so I love to photograph rocking chairs. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a rural setting that I'm photographing that rocking chair. I have 2 on my back porch right now. I live in the suburbs, but let me tell you, I could drag them in my yard and you'd never know the difference. So I think even though we're not meeting right now, but still having that content to be able to share is huge, to make sure that people realize, oh, they're still there. They still exist. Just because the world stopped doesn't mean that everything stops.
I want to go back for a second, because obviously everybody who's here understands what Facebook is and what that looks like, but I don't think a lot of folks, especially past a certain age, know or work often with Instagram. And you mentioned that a couple times, so I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about what Instagram is, and if you want to give any kind of background about how you're finding it to be a useful platform, especially for local Granges, that's great. I know we're going to be putting out an update to our communications handbook in the nearest future that I can get to it. And so, we'll have some information in there about the demographics of who's using it and things like that. So you don't feel like you have to get too deep into it, but if you could talk a little about what it is and how you encourage Granges to use it.
Sure. So Instagram is a huge platform, and if you're not on it, you should be. I will be the first to tell you I am guilty of not making our state Grange one the best it could be. That's something that's like one of my personal goals, is to make that better. But it is a visual platform, 100% visual. And it is very easy to scroll and just see pictures and see pictures and see pictures. Now, that's great, but you got to have a good caption to go with it. And that caption might not have anything to do with that picture, but that picture might stop somebody to read your caption. And so personally, I wish I can't even like pull it up really on the computer, but I'm going to pull up my personal one so you could see. And I have So I have a rhythm with my personal, and I say personal as in my own, it's for my photography business. But I have kind of a rhythm that I post, and people usually say there's like, you should pick 5 things to post, like, and it could be anything, like, you know, a picture of you, a picture of a nice scene, a picture of a flower, you know, whatever your 5 things are, pick your 5 things and kind of scroll through them. So for my personal one, I shoot a lot at the beach, especially this time of year. So I'm always going to have an ocean picture in that top 5. I'm always going to have a picture of either me or my family in that top 5, because those are personal things. They have nothing to do with really my business, but think about it in a Grange way, to where, okay, maybe you post a picture of a rocking chair, or you post a picture of your Grange haul, and then you post a picture of a meeting you had, or a pie you baked for the potluck, or, you know, something that's like brings it back to whatever is kind of the main overall theme here. But it's wonderful for finding things. So I use it a lot to search for other businesses. Like say around town, I can push the geo tag, so you can geo tag your images. I'll show you where it is on, so here's my personal one. And if I click on one of my images, this is my husband and my daughter for Father's Day, it has the geo tag, I don't know if you can see it, it says Huntersville, because that's where we live. And if I click on Huntersville, I just click that, it will show me all the pictures for that are tagged for Huntersville. So if I had a Grange here in Huntersville, I could just geo tag it, and other people would find me. And then other people might find something that they're interested in, you know, through that geo tag. You can also hashtag the things, just kind of like you can on Facebook. And that will categorize your post. And I know this is delving in deep for some people have no clue what we're talking about, but I encourage you to play around with it, because you might find things you didn't know existed. And that's kind of how we want people to view the Grange. You don't know, we're the best kept secret, right? You want people to find us, that you might be able to like hashtag nonprofit, hashtag community service, hashtag whatever town you're in. And through those filters, you're going to have people find you that wouldn't have otherwise found you.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that sometimes your picture doesn't quite have to do with what you are talking about, but sometimes it can, and it can be very like generic to it. You could be talking about what you accomplished at your meeting last night, but your picture is maybe a really nice gooey shot of a warm brownie with, like, you know, fudge and caramel coming out of it, where you're also mentioning, you know, before the great potluck or after the great potluck, we made this decision at our Grange. I love food. I don't know about you, but if I see a nice gooey warm brownie, I'm going to probably click on that because I think there might be a recipe there, or I just want to stare at the picture a little bit longer and salivate. And so, you know, somebody will engage with you in a very different way than when it's something that they just don't feel at home with. And especially for us, because food is such an amazingly huge part of our culture in Grange, you almost have an open platform with one of those 5 kind of top things that you're thinking of
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it can be great going forward. So say like Coyer Grange, they're right up the road from me, about 30 minutes. And I think it's every August, or maybe it's July, they do an ice cream social where they make tons of homemade ice cream. And you could literally take a scoop of ice cream, put Breyer's ice cream in your bowl, take a nice picture of your ice cream, and say, next month, we're going to make homemade ice cream. And so it can lead you into people that might then come, instead of like backtracking. Yeah, I want you to post what you did, but post about what you're going to be doing as well, and get people to find you and come to your meeting.
So you mentioned, you know, you could put scoop of Breyers in your bowl and take a nice photo. So here's where I guess we're going to kind of transition into the idea of what we advertise today, which is the tips and tricks. Because we've given you a little insight on how to use photos for your Grange that you might not have thought of before. But now it's important to talk about making sure those photos are good. Because I don't know about you, Jessica, but like I see a bad photo, you know, one it's fuzzy, it's out of focus. It really doesn't tell me anything. It's too busy. It's got way too much going on. It's a bunch of people going and all
Yeah.
and smiling. it doesn't really tell me what you want it to tell me. And so I think it's important to talk a lot about what is composition, what is framing, what are something that the photographer, the photo eye looks for, because the photo eye looks for something that we actually instinctively look for, that we don't recognize, that we're already, scrolling past things because they're not done well and stopping on things because they are. So now is where I kind of wanted to move over to you giving us some tips and tricks on how to make our photos better, and better that we can use in our photo competitions, but better that we can use on our posters, in our newsletters, on our Instagram, on our Facebook, to get people to stop and pay attention.
Sure. So I think the first thing to do is think about, what am I taking this picture for? What's the purpose? Is it just a snapshot that I just want to take to have on my camera roll? And that's fine, but at the end of the day, that might not serve you as well going forward. So because I run Grange News, I constantly think about the cover. And the cover means I have to have masthead space at the top. So a lot of what I shoot is going to have dead space at the top, is what I call it, dead space, because I've got to have room for text to go up there. And if you're shooting something that you want to overlay text on, say you're making an ad for Facebook or Instagram or whatever, not an ad per se, but like, you want to post something that has some text, you're going to have space for that text. So thinking about white space around whatever you're photographing. This is my house, and I've got a lot of white walls in my house because I use a lot of dead space. I will put something up against this wall and take a picture of it, and you never know I'm in the middle of my house, but I like the dead space. So I'll show you some. I'm going to share my screen. I have a few images. If I can figure out how to do it. Let's see.
Bottom middle, you should see something that says share screen.
Okay, I'm going to see if this works. That work? Okay, so this picture was on the cover of Grange News, not this past January, but the January before. So the North Carolina State Grange recognizes a farm of the year, and this was the farm of the year for that particular year. This is the Nix family farm in Henderson County, in Henderson, North Carolina. So this picture, I shoot a lot of things that are weighted heavily towards the bottom for the reason of Grange News. But visually, I personally like the weight of the image to be at the bottom. It grounds the image a little bit. And it's given me enough empty space up at the top to put text if I need text for some reason. But it also means that it can be cropped square very easily. I'm not going to lose a whole bunch of important information in the image if I crop it square. And that's a big deal for Instagram because that's how things are posted on Instagram. They're in square format. So that's a big thing, is I like to leave some negative space kind of no matter what I'm shooting. So that's one. Let me see if I can pull up another one. This is from Grange Camp last summer. The theme was like a Wild West theme. So I took these kids out and we did this silhouette shot right after the sun went down. And
you're still on the old image, just FYI.
Oh, am I? I'm sorry. Hold on. Let's find a different one. There we go. Is that better?
That you got it.
Okay. So that's from camp last summer, and same thing. It can be cropped square without losing a lot of information. It can also provide a lot of space for text if I need a space for text. There's a photography rule called the rule of thirds. And that basically means you would divide your image into thirds, top to bottom and left to right. And wherever those lines cross, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, so like that would hit about here, it would hit about here, it would hit about here, and it would hit about here. I like it because these people hit two of those thirds. They're in kind of the bottom half of the image, so they hit two of those points, and those are focal points in a camera. If you well, you can have a lot of different focal points, but those are some basic ones. And for whatever reason, our eyes are drawn to thirds. And so that's a big rule that we follow in a lot of images that we shoot. Let me see if I can find one more for you. Another thing, that first image that I shared of the family in the apple orchard, yes, that was my cover image, but this was the main image in the article. It is obviously a close-up of their apples, of their hands. I think it tells a story of like, you are having a personal touch on this product. And I loved these pictures. Her hands are not perfect. Her nails are not done. And she was so hesitant about that. She was like, oh my gosh, my rings are dirty. My nails are nasty. But I loved it because it made her real and just made it seem very authentic, where other, staged images just aren't going to be that way. So anyway, those were just a few images that I wanted to pop up right there to talk about the composition, at least, and having some dead space. You don't want to have just like tons and tons of busyness happening in your picture. Then you lose the focus of what's happening. It's the same kind of way on here. If you look at Amanda, and she has the solid background, she's very much the focus of what we're looking at, whereas it's busy behind me, guys. I mean, this is my living room. Yes, I could have like slid over into my corner and it's like not as busy, but it's just not reality. So I think sometimes you have to stage those shots just to get the simple look that you want. You're talking about that bowl of ice cream. Put that bowl of ice cream on a clean kitchen counter. Shoot it from the top down so you just see that ice cream with the circle bowl around it. And it'll be much more visually interesting than if you had your mail and your keys, and if you were shooting it from the side and you just see bowl instead of seeing ice cream. When I was in photography classes, they would teach us, look up, look down, look all around. Don't just look from 5'5", whatever your height is. You have to kind of squat, get under it, get over it, because you might get a better perspective.
You mentioned the background, and I did this on purpose because I know that my background is really, really busy. Yours is not. I don't know what you're talking about, but if I take my background off, which I'm going to do for a second just to show you, my background is all of this. It's our shirts that we have for sale still. It's different things for that sale. It's stuff that needs to go out in the mail. It's everything. And it's really distracting because someone's sitting there going, what size is that she only has a few of? And it really takes away, from what we're talking about and doing. So I stuck up this just because it makes the focus come on me and on what we're talking about. And so I think that's a really good example of something that I see really, really frequently when I get Grange pictures in. Grange halls are traditionally community centers. They're traditionally places where, we love to hang our awards and historical photos and different things like that. And so when we get photos in, oftentimes it's like they had someone in or two people in to do maybe a candidate forum, and they're taking a photo of this, but there's props up on the stage and there's stuff hanging on the wall and there's collections and donations off to the side that were given to the food bank and things, and it becomes so busy and so distracting that the photo is almost not worth having, even though we are in such a photo heavy society, and I'm like you, I need photos, really good photos for our magazine. So I'm constantly begging for them, but then sometimes I get them and it's such a disappointment because I know what will happen. Whether I like it or not, everybody who views the magazine, everybody good person like you who is sitting here going, I have no problem with the fact that you have tons of awards and that's so nice that you're taking donations, but I've totally missed what this photo is about because there's too many things to process. So I think that that's a really, really important thing. Can you talk about how you kind of set a slate and what you tell your Granges when you're asking them to give you photos?
Yeah, sure. So I'll show you another example talking about this. And you're talking about like candidate forums, or if you do awards or something like that, that moment where somebody gets an award can be an awkward exchange, and it can be in a busy Grange hall. There might be all the things hung behind them and the cat walking through, like it's just busy. And so what I'll do, yes, I will take the picture of Jimmy shaking the hand and handing the award, but 9 times out of 10, this is what I print. And I'll show you if I can find it. There it is. This is what I print. This is Lisa Packer getting her Teacher of the Year award. And she's standing, our podium is immediately right here. You can't see it in the picture. These were like the decorations around the podium. But I literally just had her step over. And I have a picture of her with her other Grange members and with Jimmy and all of that. But this was the picture I printed because it was just a nice, clean background. These are literally the hotel walls behind her. There is nothing fancy, but the focus is 100% on her. And I think that makes a huge difference, as opposed to like where Jimmy happened to be standing, there were like mic cords and it was the corner of the room and it was just a kind of an awkward setup. And I'm not going to stop what's happening when she's getting her award to say, no, let's scooch over here because that's disruptive. So I'd rather just wait and take a nice shot afterwards and to make sure, even like fake the handshake, who cares? Like when people read the magazine, they don't know the difference,
And you mentioned, I mean, even just those chords in the background, it gives it a different dimension because now we know it was at some bigger event and I'm wondering when it was. And was this the 2017 session when I was there? If it's a clean photo, it's something that you're able to use in a multitude of different locations. And it doesn't timestamp it as much. And I know that sounds strange, but sometimes you just want these clean photos to sit next to each other to say 10 years of giving a Teacher of the Year award. And then you have them all next to each other. There's different things like that I think, we often forget about as we're in the moment to get our photos. And you mentioned, not disrupting, but trying to get afterwards. And I think one of the things I've noticed in just the 10 years, of doing Grange stuff is as more and more people have their own social channels, especially, or their own mediums that they are working with, they're looking for the clean photo too. And so they are so happy to have you say, after this is over, can I get a photo, just of you with this? And they're able to use it because maybe they don't always want to be attached to the Grange giving them award. Maybe they just want to be attached with teaching a child something or doing whatever. And they can use that photo in multiple ways themselves. So don't feel, I think, that it's intrusive or that you're asking too much. Oftentimes people would prefer you to have the best shot you can that they can also reuse.
Yeah, 100%. I'll always grab, the firefighter and the military and the educator, although all the awards that we give out that go to an individual like that, I will 100% of the time grab them. And actually, Jimmy usually makes an announcement prior to even the awards beginning. Please don't leave. As soon as you get your award, we're going to be taking all the pictures and you will get copies of them afterwards. Just to set those expectations that you're not going to be standing there like this for the next 3 minutes while we all take your picture, Nobody wants that.
So, I mean, that's all part of this idea of kind of surveying your scene, I think, but there's also other things that go into that. Knowing what your background is going to be and what kind of those peripheral things and whether you've got enough space on the sides and the top in order to do whatever cropping you need or to do whatever writing or things like that you need is important. But surveying your scene to see what the lighting is like, to understand what other distractions are there, to see if, for example, your subject may have had, dirty fingers, but she might have had really dirty fingers because she was just digging in the dirt, and you knew you could at least say, hey, do you want to freshen up for a second? I think all of that is part of that surveying the scene as well. So I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about how you, when you walk in somewhere, when you're walking especially into a local Grange hall, what you look for as far as those type of things in order to make sure that you're prepared for the best photos you can take.
Sure. I think part of that is coming prepared to be able to handle any situation. Now, I know I'm in a different boat because I shoot with off-camera lights and nice fancy cameras and all that. But that aside, I think you look for a clean background, whether it is a bathroom door or the tree outside, because trees can make a really nice clean background. It doesn't have to be white or sky. As long as it's kind of a solid-ish color, I think that makes a big impact, just like Amanda's solid blue. She's not all white behind her. You know, that's a huge, huge thing for me. If you're going into a place that has a lot of windows, a lot of Granges don't always have a lot of windows, at least in North Carolina, they don't. But if they do, I'm never going to shoot into a window, because I'm going to have to really power this up and blind you to make it not blown out 100% behind you. If I flipped around, I'm all hooked in with my computer. But if I picked up my camera, I have a window right here, 2 windows. And if I turned around, it would be like blindingly light in those windows, or you would see the trees and I'd be all black. So I think just avoid looking into a window. You always want them on your side, because when you side light somebody, you give them dimension. I am partially side lit right now because I have more shadow on this side of my face than I do on this side. And it makes me not look flat. If I had a light coming straight at me, my nose and my eyes, everything would look like it's all flat. So having that side dimension is always great. Now that doesn't always line up with a nice background. That's kind of where you have to pick and choose, but good light beats a good background always. You can fuddle with your background if your light is really good. And that just comes with practice. That's something you can do in your house while you're stuck in quarantine, is find a window, take a picture of something. It doesn't have to be a person, it can be an apple, just to get that idea of how that light is going to fall and give you the shadow across whatever you're photographing. I take a lot of detail shots of things, not just people. I think I have one I have pulled up, not just the apples, but so these are just buttons that were given out at an event that we sponsored. I just laid them on our tablecloth and took a picture of them. And so I think looking at the details of things as well as is important. Now that had a solid green background because that was the tablecloth we were using. So something that simple, like we talked about that ice cream, you know, set it on your countertop, make sure there's nothing else on it, put a spoon down or something, give it some context. But those little things can help elevate what you're looking at. It can be taken with an iPhone, guys. I mean, we all know that if we stand next to a window and we take our own picture, it's 10 times better than if we're sitting way over here in the corner and take our own picture. It's all a matter of lighting. If you are in a space that has good windows, cut out the rest of the lights, because your window light and your overhead lights or your lamps are going to fight. And I'll give you an example. I purposefully turned these lights on back here because I wanted you to see the difference. Right now, my camera is fighting, and you don't realize it, but it is. Hold on, I'll show you why. Okay, now, hold on, this light's on. My camera's not fighting anymore. Everything looks the same tone. There's no orange behind me. I am not blue anymore. It makes a huge difference, and people don't usually realize that. This is 100% window light now, and I have things in front of me. Like I have a monitor and a computer and curtains, like it's filtered, but it's still better than if it was fighting with my lamps and my overhead light. So if you have the opportunity to turn lights off and only use a window light, even if it's like after your meeting or after your event, say, hey, can I grab a quick picture of you and cut those lights out real quick, grab your iPhone and take the picture instead of fighting with those lights. Because unless you're using something like this is an off-camera light to overpower what you're dealing with, you're gonna have it fight, and you don't want that. That was your lighting tutorial for the day.
I like that tutorial because it gave a really good context. I know that, you know, I have a newer iPhone because I shoot everything for National Grange on an iPhone. So I've just made sure to get the best photo or the best camera on my phone that I can. But that allows me to take really low light photos now in a lot of these Grange halls. Even a couple iterations ago, it didn't give me that ability as well. But I did notice that there were times where I would try and overlight something, and it was because I just assumed, oh, this is a little too dark. And had I just shot it on my phone and used the adjustment tools that it gives you right on this phone, which again, you don't have to do during a Grange meeting or during a situation where you really want the photos. You could do that when you take a photo of an apple at your house tonight, in kind of a low light situation, and then just start using those filters, start using those exposure tools and things that are built into these. I'm using an iPhone, but I know, pretty much every Android phone, all of those have them as well. You can play with all of that here, now, tonight, whenever, and be able to see that actually it picked up a lot more than you expected, and you're able to use those tools and not have to worry about lighting something and then never being able to undo what the lighting did.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. We all find ourselves with our phones in our pockets, but we don't always have a camera, and that is totally fine. I'm going to show you this app. So this is the Lightroom app, and it's going to update now. But you can pull photos into it, and there's all kinds of things. You can crop it, you can change the orientation. I mean, there are a bazillion different apps to do all these things. I personally love the Lightroom app, and it's free, so there's no cost there. But it will really enhance. I think most of the time, photos are just too dark. Is 90% of the problem I think we all run into is that you're in a dark space and you don't know how to make it brighter without just using the little sun tool on your phone. So when you pull up your phone, if you didn't know this, like I can click and it will bring up the box, and I can't do this backwards. See how it makes it brighter and darker? That'll only go so far. But if you pull in an app like the Lightroom app, it will greatly enhance what's already there.
Those things are, I use the same thing. It's just Photoshop, so it's got a few more bells and whistles. I know you use that as well, and that's one of the saving graces when I get a lot of photos from folks is I'm able to pump the exposure up, change some of the settings and get them to a point where we need them. One of the other problems I think that I run into a lot is folks don't know that when they send a photo, for example, in the text of a Word document, it has done a thing that's called downsampling, which means it took this, this big thing, and it basically folded it up really little to stick it inside that Word document. And I'm unable to use those for our publications. I know you run into that same thing. So having that original photo allows us to edit them, add more light or add different exposure, add a filter, add whatever we need to do, kind of color balance them a little bit. But it also allows us to be able to use them in publications that are going to a printer, because otherwise they get thrown away too. So that's kind of an important part. I want to talk a little bit about color, because what I noticed is, especially your photo that you mentioned was your cover, you had a lot of kind of muted colors, and then the pops of color were actually your apples in the trees. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how someone can look for ways to make sure that there's not too much color, or how color can complement the story that you're trying to tell.
So if you have the opportunity to pre-plan, which I always do with my farm of the year, I don't always get to do it with events, but if I can, I always prep my clients or people I'm shooting for the Grange and say, this is what you should wear, because it's my job as a photographer to give you the best possible outcome. And if you show up in like your pajamas, you're not going to be happy, and I'm not going to want to print it. So I think I always tell people no logos. I don't want Nike across you, and yeah, that's different.
My giant Grange logo can go home. Okay.
No, because inevitably you will have okay, if I'm shooting family farm of the year, a lot of times I end up with kids in the pictures, and kids will always show up in Dora the Explorer, and you just don't want that. And so you have to let your clients, let your people know that you're photographing. Hey, if you could show up in a solid color or a very small print, you know, something like that. Or if you have the opportunity to give them some instruction as far as a group goes and how to put them together in that group, it will make your photo not so busy. So if that family that I showed had let's see, let me pull it up again, I'll forget. If this particular family had been like in hot pink and bright green and yellow, and you know, it would have been really distracting. But they took all my advice, and I said, you know, wear grays and blacks, and if you want casual, wear jeans. If you want dressy, wear dresses or slacks. You really have to point them in that direction, because people just don't know, and I'm not going to fault them for that. I think the girl, the blonde in the picture, she has on a Carhartt jacket. That's the only logo that's in there, and I probably should have got rid of that, and but I didn't. But they are not distracting from the apples. If they had worn all red, those apples would be lost. Kind of the same thing with green. If they had worn all green, they would blend right into those trees. So that, I mean, you kind of have to think about where and what you're photographing and how to make your subjects play into that. A lot of our, especially the farm of the year, they are, I don't want to say they're a big farm, but a lot of times they've got branded shirts, they have branded hats. And so a lot of times they will wear those branded things. The mom in this picture, she actually has on a branded vest. You can't see it in this particular shot, but you're not distracted by Nike or Dora or, you know, any of those things that are, like my eye immediately goes to that Carhartt logo, and it's driving me nuts now because I wish I'd gotten rid of it. But other things like that are going to distract you. And so having that, not only a clean, simple background to deal with, but also having clean, simple clothing can elevate the picture, I think, a lot more than if it had been really busy. Because if one girl had on a plaid dress and one girl had on a floral dress and dad had on a suit and tie, and you know, they would look very disjointed. So giving them some clear instruction prior to is a big thing. When we have state convention and our firefighter of the year come and our military people come, I've actually never requested this, but I'm going to start doing it now that I'm saying it out loud. They always come in uniform, and I think that's just the nature of what they do and how they operate. They always show up in uniform, but it makes that picture very recognizable immediately if I print it. People are like, oh, who's that military guy? Oh, who's that police officer? They see it and they recognize it, and they're like, oh, I wonder what they did. And it'll make them stop and look. So giving people instruction ahead of time, if it's possible, do it 100% of the time. People are glad to get instruction instead of walking in blindly.
So when you get news stories to include in the magazine, or even on your social media from your Granges, how have you dealt with action shots? Or have you ever talked with any of your Granges about how to take action shots? And by that, I don't mean like a football game. You know, we're not talking about, you know, people crashing into each other, but action in the Grange, serving somebody some food at a potluck, shaking somebody's hand at the reception of an award, being, you know, presenting the flag at a meeting, anything like that that's action. How have you worked with your folks with that?
So I'll be honest, I haven't probably been great at voicing for them how to do that.
Don't worry, no, I'm not either.
I've been really fortunate that a lot of what is sent to me is either a detailed shot. So I'll give you an example. Grantham Grange runs a fair booth where they serve hamburgers and hot dogs, I believe. And while they don't ever give me a picture of them with a plate, like I would love a picture of like a hamburger and a hot dog, they will give me a picture of the booth, which is great. Like I love seeing a picture of their stand, because it's not like a table, it's an actual enclosed booth. And that's really cool. I love seeing stuff like that. This is just a picture I shot from one of our events, but let's see, where is it? Here it is. So this was at an event we did in Raleigh where it was a lot of different organizations involved, but we had a booth, and these are some of our Grange members that came to the booth to grab some things and bring some friends. And I just stepped to the side of the booth so I could get both sides, because it's real easy to either stand on the left where our employees are standing or stand on the right where the members are standing, and you only get one perspective. I like to be able to get two perspectives at the same time. So you get the member engaging and picking something up, and you have the employees laughing with the members. So there, you can tell there's an exchange happening there.
And
It's
I see
not
one of my favorite North Carolina members, Miss Linda Crawford, right there.
Miss Linda Crawford. Those are all some Grange members, so if they're watching, they'll be excited to see it. Yeah, I like that perspective to see, either to like, if I didn't shoot that way, I would have stood behind my coworkers and shot from their perspective of somebody grabbing something in front of them. And I'll do that quite often at other events that we run. But those are the kind of the two I like to see the exchange. It's not just two people, because I have the picture of Linda Crawford looking at me and smiling. That of course happened, but you have to anticipate that moment before it happens to get the get what's happening. And actually, I think I have another one that's not like it's from camp.
Well, I think one of the important things that you did there was you didn't give us the butt shot.
Right.
So often, we have the Grangers who they want to show us them serving somebody a platter. But what they're getting is, instead of going over somebody's shoulder and just getting someone smiling and receiving the platter, they're getting the whole person's backside. We never get any face. And I truly believe that these people, there are people out there walking around with only backsides and no front sides, based on all the photos that I get. So they're the butt shots.
Yes, that is so true. And it is easy to do that from afar. I think another tip is get close. Get so much closer than you think you need to be. Guys, I am sitting like 2.5 feet from my computer. That's close. If I was like way back here, I would get lost. I get lost in the mess that's behind me. So get close, get that hand. I want to see like what you're doing, what you're handing out. Even if it's like a shot of two hands, like giving something, like give me this shot over like here any day.
Well, the closer that you get, I had a journalism professor talk to us about this, about photojournalism, was you raise the intimacy, you raise the immediacy, you raise the intensity. And I thought that was interesting, and I've always remembered that. Somebody needs that set of fries and hot dogs right now. They want it. They have an intense feeling for it. And that they are happy to be receiving it from us, because you have gotten close enough to show all of those things on the person. And I would have never thought of that before that class, but it does then make me a little bit paparazzi when I go and take a photo, because, hey, Jessica, I'm going to get your photo now, okay? It is a little disconcerting, especially for people who aren't very assertive. But I think that at the end of the day, somebody is allowing you to take their image and their likeness and use it for something. Even if it's just for your own personal satisfaction of what you had seen or done that day. And none of us, there's a reason why I'm not shooting this from this angle. There is a reason that we're talking from more these angles or these angles. There's a reason why duck face exists. People want to look good in the photos. And so if you can tell them, I'm going to get a little close to take this photo, it's going to look better, please come on in.
By all means, do it. Yes. My computer is sitting on 2 4-inch boxes because this is not attractive, guys. Nobody likes all this. That's not fun.
I was gone for 5 days and my husband moved my books that I normally set this on, and I didn't realize it until I was getting on with you, and I was like, oh no, the chin.
Yeah, you always want to come a little bit down. We don't want to do this. Yeah. Yeah, but you're talking about like creating that intimacy and that I think that's why I love the apple shot so much, is you see this husband and wife holding what they created. It's not just holding apples, like that's what they created. Um, and like, you know, you talk about different perspectives and things like that. This, I don't know that I've ever printed this picture because it's not very clear, but I'm going to show it anyway. I love this picture from camp because, yeah, I could have been down where the kids were standing, where the kid goes to run, but then it's a butt shot. We don't want the butt shot. And if I'm on, and I have some from the other side of the pins, but until you hit the pins, I don't see you. And then the moment's kind of over. But this one I just love because there's two things happening, or three things happening. You know, you have the anticipation of these kids. How many pins is he going to hit? And then you have, this is Anna. Okay, how many pins is he going to hit? But then you have this whole separate line of activity happening behind them that's, it has nothing to do with this guy, but it's interesting of its own, right? Like they're having to bring this wet sponge back down this line and squeeze it. But then I've got lots of negative space that is not distracting from what's happening. You know, you're drawn to this kid sliding into the pins and these kids passing this sponge back. It's just, there's a lot of anticipation in this picture that I love. And so I think it, you know, it could be kids standing there smiling, that's great, but that told you what happened that night.
I think that was a really good example too of the grounding effect that you have, because 2/3 of the bottom of your photo all is green or action. And that top third, it almost gave it necessary balance. I know if I was working on the magazine and I really needed space, I would cut a lot into that. But if I cut too far into it, if I cut just down to where all the green started, it would be an overwhelmingly dark photo. And it would give nowhere for my eyes to take a break, which is, you know, another element that we talk about a lot with visual communication. So having somewhere where your eyes can go and kind of breathe for a minute is really important as well. And that photo is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, there definitely always needs to be a path for your eye to kind of follow in a picture, but also a spot for it to end and to take that breather.
So I wanted to get some tips from you on what people can do to make their photos better besides what we've already kind of covered, because everybody has their own different device, whether it's a camera or a camera phone or something. I don't think it's appropriate to ask for a lot of specifics, but I was hoping that you could tell us, you know, a little bit more about how we can make good keepsakes. And then you run a photo contest. We have a national one. I'm sure almost every state has one. So some good tips where they can place this year in their photo contest.
So definitely how you use light. If you know what the word photography means, it literally means the study of light. So understanding how that light is going to impact what you're photographing is going to be the first thing to kind of get a wrangle on. I love window light. Window light can be so beautiful. Outside, it's really easy to take a good picture, and it is really easy to take a bad picture when you're outside. If the light, like right now, what is it? It's like 3:30 in North Carolina. It is bright. There ain't a cloud in the sky here. It's beautiful, but that does not make a good picture usually. You end up with these really, really harsh shadows. Like window light is filtered, so I don't have a real harsh shadow right here, but you can end up with some really hard shadows that aren't so flattering. So knowing kind of what time of day. So typically if you're outside, I will say a lot of photography contests that North Carolina runs is a lot of outside driven things. And we do that mainly because it's an opportunity that we all have to be outside. Maybe not during quarantine, but normally. So like, I think one of ours this year is scenic views. We could all tackle that at any point. That's an easy one. Whether we go to the beach this summer, we step out of our front door, you know, there's a scenic view anywhere to be had. So, but understanding how that light impacts that scenic view is huge. And one of my favorite things to do is pick up a magazine you love and flip through it and figure out what is it about the pictures in there that you like? A lot of times, pictures that are printed, I'm going to use Our State. That's the North Carolina magazine. That's like, I don't know if that's nationally, it's probably just in North Carolina. But if you look up Our State
It
online,
is
it
North
is a,
Carolina, and it's my favorite, like, not news publication. In fact, if you look at that, because I saw that when I was with my grandmother in North Carolina in 2011-12, that's where the inspiration for a lot of Good Day came from.
it is a stunning magazine, and I'll tell you, one of my goals in life is to be printed in that book. That is a personal goal of mine. I actually have a really good friend who shoots for them, and I envy her every time I get to see that she's on one of those shoots. But look at a publication that is very visually heavy that you like, and figure out why you like it. Now, it might be something like Our State. There's a really great publication, and it might be nationwide now, but it's primarily about the South. It's called Garden and Gun. And I bet a lot of Grangers will love that magazine. It's fantastic. Talks a lot about Southern rural life.
Amazing.
Yes, fantastic magazine. What else? I love Coastal Living. That's obviously a national publication. I love Veranda. That's like a home-based magazine. Anyway, but those are all visually heavy publications. Flip through them and figure out what it is about a picture that you like. And I would be willing to bet you 9 times out of 10, those pictures are taken at sunrise or they're taken at sunset, because the light is so much softer at those points. Now, those moments happen quickly. Sunrise happens quick and sunset happens quick. So there's a very small amount of time you have in there to capture that. But think about, like, if you go to the mountains, if you have mountains where you are, so many images that you see that are published of mountains are right as the sun is coming up over them or right as the sun is setting down past them. And that's just how they've utilized the light that was available to them. They didn't use any outside fancy equipment. They just harnessed the sunlight that was there to their abilities. So if you're shooting outside, make sure I won't say make sure, because I love shooting in the middle of the day, but I'm an anomaly. Sunrise and sunset, though, are going to be your prettier light, your softer light, your more filtered light. Even if it's a bright sunny day, a lot of times in the morning you've got a touch of cloud cover to break that light from being so harsh. So that's a huge tip. It's just figuring out how to harness that light, whether it's the window coming in being side lit or harnessing your sunlight to the best of your ability. That's going to be your number one tip to making a pretty picture. I think number 2 is how you frame that. And, do you use those rule of thirds? Because being centered is great, but I'm very center heavy in this image of me on the computer. It might be more interesting if I'm over here or over here. And when I shoot people, I'll be honest, I don't shoot a lot of horizontal images. I shoot a lot of vertical. But when I shoot horizontal, I'm always putting somebody here, because there might be really pretty scenery behind them that if they're in the middle, they break up. And there's also, if you're leaving a lot of white space or dead space, you've got room for text, or it just gives your eye a break at that point. An image starts here, it gets interesting, and then it flows out. I think those rule of thirds and how you compose, you don't want to cut people's heads off, and you don't want them way down here. That's all composition of what you're trying to accomplish. So thinking about the lighting and the composition are going to be the two biggest things. People get into editing a lot, and I'm not a big editor. A photographer and an editor are 2 completely separate things. I hate editing. That's why I shoot film, because film is a very different medium. Editing makes me a little bit crazy, but you can do plenty of things to enhance your pictures that way. It's just not my favorite way to do that.
I once had somebody, ask me if I could basically turn something old that they had provided to me. And there's no way, to do that without basically destroying the original image, which I agree with you, editing is a very different thing. And so if you wanted a child's hands, or if you wanted an elderly person's hands holding a Bible, because both tell a really incredible story, even if that wasn't the full intention initially, then other hands. I mean, strong, very masculine, you know, kind of dirt riddled and gruff hands on a Bible are different than just hands. So you need to shoot that. You can't expect that you're going to be able to edit that in.
No.
And I think that those are important things to think about too when you're going through, is that some elements can tell different stories. So, you know, if you are thinking about adding certain things to your photo, they might tell competing or contrasting story, or they might enhance the story that you're trying to tell. So if you want to tell the story of the Grange and you have a bunch of hands being held together, you know, to talk about fellowship and fraternity, and the only hands that you have are older, it's going to tell a story that this is an older organization where we're making sure to hold on to culture, or we're making sure to hold on to each other and help each other, you know, as life moves forward, versus a younger hand and an older hand put together can tell a story of a much more almost inclusive, you know, multi-generational organization like we are. So thinking about that composition is super important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And something else I was going to say, so because I've been in this job for so long, I have seen, you know, the ebb and flow of a lot of different things come out of nationals. And when I first started, Rusty Hunt was national membership director. And I loved Rusty. He was great. And he was creating a document about starting Granges. And, you know, at the time, we were all, well, maybe not all, but there was a lot of stock imagery happening, and there still is. But that entire document was stock images, and that's fine. But there was not a single person that wasn't white in that entire document. And I think that is a huge thing that we have to think about as an organization. While, yes, we are primarily Caucasian, I think we all know that. Do we want to be primarily Caucasian, you know? And not only, you know, if we're showing an intergenerational picture with an older hand and a younger hand, that tells a story. You're absolutely right. It means that we cross generations, and that there are young children and older people mingling in the same space. But just like we want to mingle with different generations, I think you also have to show that we mingle with people that aren't just Caucasian. We try really hard to show, you know, more races in North Carolina, because we cater to them. I mean, if you come to summer camp with us, they're all different races come to camp with us, and we love it all. You know, nobody's different. And I think it's important to know, to show that we are an inclusive organization, as well as multi-generational as well. So I think that's something really, even if you're using stock images, if you're having to find stock images, you know, really assess what you're looking at. Because one thing I've learned as being a photographer, whatever you show is what you will attract. And so if I only showed newborn pictures, I would only ever book newborns. If I only ever show teenagers at summer camp, maybe that's all I'll ever have interested in my organization. So I think it's really important to show what you want to be, maybe not what you always are. And I don't mean that to say dishonestly, but you have to put a persona out there of what you want to be and live up to it.
You guys have probably one of the most diverse state Granges. You know, just when you look at the percent of people who fall into different categories, you have more parity than most other state Granges, I think, in a lot of ways, and partially because of your camp. And I think that that's one thing that is very hard sometimes, to walk a fine line of not making someone or some few people poster children for their entire race, gender, age group, whatever. Boy, isn't that kid cute? We're going to use her over and over and over. And so this only becomes her organization, not everybody's. because we don't have spokes or, image spokespeople for the Grange, right? We don't have, specific brand images that are just one person or one type of people. And so walking a fine line is really, really hard, but it's important. It's important to kind of
It's so important. Yeah. And I think it can be true for not just race, but also, I don't know the right word to use, but, in North Carolina, we have plenty of members who don't live on farms. A lot of our members, I don't live on a farm. I didn't grow up on a farm, but so I don't always want to show a farmer boy in my pictures, even if I'm drawing stock imagery, from the Google. I don't always want to just Google farmer boy to have as like the pic, or like farm family. You might want to just have your run of the mill suburbanite like myself, because that's what I am, but I'm a member. So I think showing their demographic as a whole, not just their age or whatever, but don't pigeonhole yourself into only showing kids and cowboy hats.
We also have a real problem when you look at stock image, and this is where I think it's really important for Grangers to be able to tell stories visually, is a lot of the stock images that are available to us don't look like our communities. If you put in like gathering place and you're trying to look for a little bit younger of a demographic, or at least a multi-generational demographic, you're getting like very upscale type city coffee shops. You're getting people behind laptops with, neckties on when you put in meeting. That's not our style of meeting, and that's not our style of meeting place. Our meeting place may be, a couple of chairs outside of a old, gas station that also has, the barbecue joint in town and has the checkers boards for the guys. But we can't get those stock photos. So having our folks do good photography, I think, is really important, because it's telling the story of rural America in a way that we're not getting in a lot of other senses.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's very easy to Google meeting and that just doesn't come up with what you want. So for a long time, North Carolina's baking contests were centered around sweet potatoes, blueberries, apples, and there was one more, nuts, peanuts. I don't remember. Anyway, so for a long time, like I couldn't just Google those particular products and get stock images. I literally went to the grocery store and I bought sweet potatoes and nuts and put them on my kitchen counter and photographed them for Grange News, because I couldn't just Google what I wanted and get a result that came up that made sense to my readership for why I was putting that picture there. But if I took the picture, even if I could have taken that on my iPhone, it wouldn't have mattered. But it gives me a visual that makes sense for our members.
And it gives you a visual that you 100% know you have the rights to. Because a couple weeks ago we talked about, if you do just go on the internet and grab a photo that feels right to you, you have to know that you have the permission to use it, whether it's you have the photographer's permission, you've purchased a stock photo license. It is truly an open source, open license, Creative Commons type situation. So creating your own photos is such a huge benefit to you and to the rest of the organization, because you're able to use those in your social media, you're able to use those in your brochures, and then of course you're able to turn them around in press releases or to one of us to be included in our Grange publications. There's so many things that we can do with the photos when they're given to us that are in a really good quality. So I'm going to ask
it's a powerful thing to have.
So I'm going to ask you two last questions, and then we'll wrap up. I know that you've judged photo contests before, or you've been kind of privy to that, even if it's not in the Grange sense. As a judge, what are some of those things that automatically move something to the, wow, this might be a winner pile? And what are things that push it right off the table that you're not going to continue to look at it?
I think brightness for sure, or having light in the right way, whether it's the whole thing is bright and lit up appropriately, or light is used to like carve something. So just kind of like the example I gave for the kids at camp with the hats and everything. Like, light was used appropriately to light them or not light them. So you got a feel of that image. So if something's too dark, and too dark meaning it's dark and it was supposed to be light, because plenty of images are dark and supposed to be dark. But I think that's definitely a kicker. And if it's clear like it's supposed to be clear. There's plenty of beautiful artsy images that are not clear, that are meant to be not clear. But when you take something and it's just fuzzy and it's just not crisp the way it could be, your iPhone can take really crisp images if you can hold it still enough. I am one to like prop it. I can't do it on here. I will like prop it just so it's still, because no matter how much you hold your breath or you think that you're still, we all move just a little bit. So I think that, and we all take pictures that we think are clear, and then we're like, oh, I thought that was clear. Like, take it and be sure that, especially on something where you can check it like this, that things should be crisp when they're supposed to be crisp.
I hammer this point a lot, but if you're not comfortable or you don't have an advanced camera phone or something like that, you don't have a digital camera, this is a place where you can get a lot of younger folks to step up and do something for your Grange or engage with your Grange for the first time by saying to them, not so much that we have a contest, sure, that's fantastic, but I want to see the Grange the way other people see it. Would you come in and take some photos for us? Could you come take a photo of the baking contest or something like that? They have these things in their hands all the time. And that doesn't mean that every young person is taking fantastic photos. We know that, but they certainly at least have the grasp on some of the technology. So if you don't, this is yet another place to find their role in your Grange.
Yeah, that's a great point. I used to always use the example of, everybody should have a job at the Grange. And I forget who gave the example years ago, but it was like, if you have a kid that maybe has a mental disability, he may not be able to lead a meeting, but he sure can wipe down your tables after dinner's over and make him feel important. It's the same way. Good gracious, 17-year-old girls, they know how to use these things. Put them to work. I know, because I have a 17-year-old niece, and they constantly take pictures. They love to post them and give them a job, drag them to a meeting and give them a job and say, hey, will you just take 10 really great pictures on your phone and text them to me later?
Yeah, you can even ignore what's going on in the meeting. Like, yeah, you're our photographer for the night. That way you don't have to worry about the boring stuff. And I bet you in a couple weeks they'd be sick of ignoring the boring stuff and start giving you their opinion.
Yes.
That or indifferent. Just before I go to my last question, Debbie Fish asked, what about action photos in the sense of blurring that shows the action?
Yeah, so I love motion blur when it's appropriate. So in another life, for almost 10 years, I photographed weddings. And I love a good dress twirl where father of the bride is dancing with his daughter and he spins her around and you see her dress go. And it's not sharp and it's not in focus. That's so purposeful though. So I think if you have a good purpose for the motion blur, like maybe you're hosting a 5K and you got kids zooming past you, then it's completely appropriate to not have them in focus. So if it's meant to tell part of the story, like they're going fast or she's twirling around quickly in her dress, that tells part of the story with your image. And it maybe gives you a little bit of a sense of what it was like to be there, instead of it just being a stationary, stagnant photo. So it can definitely play a valuable purpose when it's used correctly, for sure.
But something in that photo is probably going to be in focus, whether it's the trees behind the runners, for example, because they're not moving, or the dad as he's standing holding out his hand as the daughter's twirling, there's probably something that's in focus, and that's the way to tell if it's just a really poorly done photo that's fuzzy all around or a purposeful blur.
Yes.
So my last question was about stock photos. So we talked a little bit about stock photos. And those, of course, are photos that you can use, you buy from a service or get a license to use them. They aren't specific to anything. You're kind of just adapting them and putting them next to something. But I'm thinking about Grange stock photos. So I have my list in my head of, the top 50 things I would love to have a bunch of different photos of. But what are some things that you would love to have as stock photos that you could use in multitudes of ways across different mediums that really showcase Grange?
Gosh, that's a hard question. I think one of the things maybe that so at the beginning of quarantine, right before everything shut down in North Carolina, there was a tulip farm that I happened to find out about like 2 days before their season ended. And I love tulips. They are my absolute favorite flower. And in my head, they're always grown in Europe and not here. And I'd never be able to go see them and pick them. But I found out about this tulip farm that's like an hour and a half from me. And they were doing, because of quarantine, they were doing, you had to pick slots to come to the farm, and they were limiting the number of people that were there. And I managed to snag a spot, and I was so excited. And I went to this tulip farm, and it's this glorious farmhouse with the whole front yard is tulips and these beautiful rows, and they're planted strategically. And anyway, I went because I wanted to pick tulips, but I also took my camera along because hello tulips. So I take all these pretty pictures of this tulip farm, and guys, that tulip farm, this will make you laugh. So I posted pictures of this tulip farm on the North Carolina Grange Instagram, and I tagged the farm. So now this farm knows who we are. And then I tagged them on Facebook because I like the picture. And then they made the back cover of Grange News. And I need to like send them a stack of them. So I'm trying to build a relationship with these people because I like what they do, and they're a farm and they make sense with the organization I work for. So I think stuff like that to me is my bucket list of more scenic things, and being able to make those scenic things make sense with our organization and maybe build relationships off of that. Like I talked about, coming back or going to Grange Camp, and I stop at that same tobacco farm every summer. One of these days I'm gonna figure out who owns it, because I keep using their pictures. But that to me is bucket list stuff. It's not necessarily Grange heavy, but I can use it in a way to promote our organization. And I think something that might be Grange heavy can be easy to get hung up on. Like, what does that mean? Does it just mean a Bible? Does it mean an American flag? Does it mean food? I think it's easy to get hung up on mixing those two things. But if you just take one that maybe kind of makes sense, you can put a story behind it.
I have, in my bucket list, just because of what I end up working on. So the next time that we have a Grange and You brochure or something, and we're introducing what the degrees mean or what the implements mean, I have those on my bucket list. And I've actually laid very small versions of them out on my slate table here at home and taken it with a lot of that white space around it. But then also on my list were things that I don't have, like someone putting a sash on, where you can tell it's a sash, and you may not be able, because of how they're adjusting it, be able to see exactly what office it is. Just shots like that can be used to explain parts of the organization. But I agree with you. I think that on the rest of my list are things like, the potluck. I mean, I could use 800 of those images because I could use them almost every week to tell some type of story. But the potluck is something you cannot find on stock services that looks like Grange. Not only is not the food not really what you're looking for, because they may have beautiful roasted turkeys with, fresh carrots that have been grilled, and just things like that you're like, that's not quite the potluck I'm thinking. But they also don't have the same type of faces that you would see at the Grange, serving each other and talking and laughing. It just doesn't have the feel, So that's not per se Grange, but in some ways it really is.
Yeah.
And
I think talk about potluck, I think about like crock pots, and I think about red and white checkered tablecloths and ladder back chairs, things that aren't necessarily a plate with a dish on it. It's the environment in which it's served.
And I have also figured out that old people don't laugh. And I say these things to be funny, but at the same time, if you go to some of the biggest stock sources and you attempt to narrow down your search by like elderly laughing or senior adult laughing or something like that, none of them are laughing. Their lives are very serious. You can find teenagers laughing, you can find children laughing, you can find families laughing, you can find young adults laughing. But if you search those terms together, it doesn't happen. Yet I see it happen in the Grange all the time.
Yeah.
The problem is, most of the time when I see it happening, I can't recreate it with that pretty background,
Mm-hmm.
And our halls, that's the last thing. Our halls are unique. If you go into a Grange hall and take some photos, it may not be my hall, but I will still know it's a Grange hall in a lot of ways. And finding photos of buildings, outside or inside, that look a little like us so that I could use it. For example, if you had an image where you had a Grange hall in the background, in a nice scene of mountains or ocean or sea or lake or whatever, that would be fantastic, because we don't have any of those either. And so those are on my list. So if anybody's really interested in trying out this photography stuff, I would tell you, consider taking some of those and seeing what you can gather and get, because we would love to have your stash of photography too.
Yeah, that's a great thing for people to practice while we're kind of all stuck at home a little bit is, if you have a Grange hall, go out at sunset and photograph it. So Katie Green, if you are on here or if you watch this later, she lives across the street from Coyer and she works in our office, and she has a beautiful picture of Coyer Grange Hall. I think it's at sunset. Email that to Amanda.
Something that doesn't have, just that Grange name screeching on it, because then, of course, if I'm in Seattle and I'm looking at it and I'm like, what the hell do I care about Courier's Grange? Again, I've seen this photo 19 times, but just knowing that it's a hall, which right. I think we know, I think that would be exciting to have too. So,
yeah,
Jessica, I'm super excited to have you here and to have you given these tips. And I'm sure we're going to have a few folks who have put some comments or questions on the side. So you're welcome to come and grab some of those. But my last question for you is, what are you photographing today?
Oh, today.
Or the next day. What is on your list for the next news?
Well, 4th of July week starts next week, and I will be photographing all the watermelon and all of the pictures of my little girl at the beach. I always have my camera. Yesterday, we went to the lake with my high school best friend and her husband, and on their new boat, and that was glorious. And I literally, I don't have my camera sitting here that I took, but so like I said, I shoot film primarily, and I literally took 6 pictures. That's all I needed to take. It was fine. You can go snap happy on your phone very easily, but I love shooting film because it forces me to think about what I'm taking pictures of, because it costs me about $3 every frame I take. So yesterday I took a few pictures of my husband and my daughter on the sandbar that we were kind of pulled up at, and then he jumped in the boat to grab something, and I was like, hey, take a picture of me with Kate, because, you know, moms, we never are in the picture. So never, never. So that is what I have photographed. And yeah, I don't know. I have some families to photograph at the beach next week, but other than that, I have beautiful hydrangeas in my backyard currently, and I'm obsessed with them, and I keep taking pictures of those. So that's probably the next thing I'll photograph.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of your photos because I love following some of your stuff. And if you're on Instagram, what is your Instagram that they can all follow? Yeah.
My handle is at JJ Horton, Horton, like the elephant. And if you hop on to North Carolina, we're at NC Grange, and I am going to try really hard to make our Instagram better.
We will look forward to seeing that because you guys have some beautiful photos in your magazine, so I can't wait to see them coming up more frequently on Instagram. Thank you so much again, Jessica. Enjoy some time with your daughter.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay, we're done live streaming.